Despite what we'll call a quiet period in the special counsel's investigation, the Washington Post reports Robert Mueller's team is, quote, aggressively pursuing possible ties between the Trump campaign and WikiLeaks. You remember them. At the center of the latest inquiry is President Trump's associate and friend of over 3 decades, Roger Stone. Washington Post reporter Carol Leonnig has a byline on the story and is standing by to join us. The Post reports, and we quote, in recent weeks, a grand jury in Washington has listened to more than a dozen hours of testimony, and FBI technicians have pored over gigabytes of electronic messages. That's the part that got our attention. As part of the special counsel's quest to solve one burning mystery, did longtime Trump advisor Roger Stone or any other associate of the president have advanced knowledge of WikiLeaks' plans to release hacked Democratic emails in 2016? Today, in a statement to NBC News, Stone denied the accusations, writing, and this gets a bit tough, but it's as written. I never received anything, including allegedly hacked emails from Guccifer 2.0, the Russians, WikiLeaks, Assange, no punctuation, or anyone else, and never passed anything on to Donald Trump, the Trump campaign, or anyone else. There is no witness who can honestly testify otherwise, and no evidence to the contrary. Well, with us for more, the aforementioned Carol Leonnig, Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter with The Washington Post, and former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance, who spent 25 years as a federal prosecutor. Carol, I saw you on our 4 p.m. broadcast, and we agree on one central point that we can't get beyond. How did Roger Stone know to predict that Clinton's campaign chairman was about to have his turn in the barrel, Tony Podesta?
6 weeks before the amazing Podesta emails are leaked.
How did he know that?
How did he know that? He's said a lot of different things, but one thing Roger Stone has said more consistently than others is that he had some research that was provided to him by a conspiracy theorist who passed on something to a journalist, and he received this information, and it suggested, wow, this trove of emails that were released about Hillary Clinton's campaign were missing materials from John Podesta. That must be coming. It does seem a little prescient, and people are straining to see how that could be true.
Joyce, if you're Mueller, what does Stone get you? What does Stone bring you?
Stone brings 30 years of relationship with President Trump. They've known each other for a long time. He's got long-term relationships with Manafort. He has history with all of the key players who are central to discerning whether or not the Trump campaign was engaged in a conspiracy with Russia to impact the election.
Where do you believe, you and I have talked on the air many times about Roger Stone, about that target on his back, about the heat. What do you think this is all toward?
You know, Roger Stone is like every other key witness in a conspiracy. You can't go around him. You have to confront all of the evidence as it comes to you. And Stone has made so many public statements about his connections with WikiLeaks. There are so many, as Carol so nicely puts it, otherwise inexplicable statements, predictions that he makes about acts that come to pass. As Mueller, as the prosecutors in this case, you have to understand how he made those. Was he a braggart? Is he a liar, or was he actually connected to WikiLeaks and Russia? And if so, what, if any, of that information did he pass on to Trump, since he also claimed that he and Trump talked frequently during the campaign? You've got to go through that a piece at a time and figure out what's true and what's not true.
Carol, just remind us, to our knowledge, Roger Stone has not been called in.
That's right. Although 7 associates and friends have, and a lot of them have had their emails reviewed, their text messages reviewed, their DMs reviewed. There's quite a lot of people around Roger Stone who've come under the scrutiny of the special counsel. They must not be enjoying having an association with Roger Stone at this moment. But I liked very much what Joyce just said about this issue of going through. It may prove at the end of the day, Brian, that Roger Stone was a bragger who didn't have any real connection to WikiLeaks, no special back channel, even though he boasted of it privately, even though he had some unusual prescience in his predictions. but he does know a lot about Donald Trump, the candidate. Did he know about anything else that was going on behind the scenes that Donald Trump, who doesn't use email, was talking about?
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.